If you're a team that is picking towards the top of the NFL draft and need a quarterback, this is the draft for you. At number 1, there's no debate. It's a near lock that the Jacksonville Jaguars will select Trevor Lawrence. He's been called by many as the best quarterback prospect to enter the draft since Andrew Luck.
Lawrence looks downfield, going to throw it downfield, got Rodgers open. Touchdown, Clemson.
What a perfect throw.
After Lawrence, however, there is some debate. Zach Wilson saw his draft stock skyrocket after a phenomenal 2020 season and is firmly in play for the Jets at number 2. Mac Jones led Alabama to the national championship and completed 77% of his passes in the process.
Touchdown, Alabama, Mac Jones.
The only question with Jones is, how will he look without elite teammates all around him? And then there's Justin Fields, who didn't quite put up the same numbers as he did in 2019. But as he showed on New Year's Day versus Clemson,
His 6th touchdown pass of the night.
he has a tantalizing skill set and just might be scratching the surface of his potential. And lastly, you have the biggest mystery of the draft in Trey Lance. His 2019 season was basically flawless, accounting for 42 touchdowns and no picks. In 2020, he only played in one game where he was a little up and down.
The Picasso, the creation of Trey Lance.
You're likely to hear all 5 of these names called on day 1 of the NFL draft. But where they land after the first pick is anyone's guess.
Just hanging out with the Jags there. All right. We are talking about quarterbacks today. Trevor Lawrence, yes, undeniably the number 1 overall pick in this draft. But can he live up to the hype once he enters the NFL? Zach Wilson, how high will he go? Justin Fields, can he stay consistent? Trey Lance, just how athletic is he? And what about Mac Jones? We're going to talk about all of them. Let's bring in our draft expert, Ryan Wilson, also football analyst and writer, Emory Hunt. Ryan, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to start with Trevor Lawrence. No question why he's number 1 here is according to our draft rankings. But I want to talk about his expectations because there's so much hype around him, like there was John Elway, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck. I mean, what do you expect from him realistically in the NFL? Can he live up to these names?
It's going to be a lot to live up to, Amanda. That's exactly right. He does have some background in having to live up to expectations at Clemson. He did it for 3 years. So he has the ability and something to fall back on in terms of knowing what that pressure is like. But what can we expect going forward? That's the thing. So here's my comp for Trevor Lawrence, because there are very few people who are 6'6", about 220 pounds that can do the things that he does. It's Justin Herbert 2020. It's the rookie season of Justin Herbert with the Chargers, because Justin Herbert had up and down moments at Oregon his last 2 years there. And I wasn't exactly sold a year ago at this time that he was going to be, or was at least worth being a top 10 pick based on those inconsistencies, but he brought it all together once he got into the NFL. And I think if Trevor Lawrence plays close to what we saw from Herbert as a rookie in Jacksonville, that is a home run for the Jaguars organization. It means they finally found their franchise quarterback after having drafted 1 year. Every 3 or 4 or 5 years, it feels like. So yeah, the expectations are going to be there. The pressure is going to be there. But luckily, Trevor Lawrence has seen it and faced it and overcome it in college. And I expect he'll do the same thing in Jacksonville, where they have a ton of cap space. They have a ton of draft picks, a new coaching staff that's eager to win. And Trevor Lawrence is going to be the first piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you draft someone like Trevor Lawrence first overall, you're expecting him to step in and be stable. And what Ryan talked about, I agree with him wholeheartedly. You have to have a guy that has played a lot of games, and we've seen Trevor Lawrence play in big games, meaningful games, significant games since his true freshman season, stepping in for Kelly Bryant, going on through the playoffs, beating that Alabama team, and then playing in multiple ACC title games, multiple playoff games. So he's battle tested. So he's ready to step in and face what he's gonna face in the NFL. And that Jaguars team is not terrible by NFL standards. They have some talent on that team. All they needed was someone to stabilize that quarterback position, and that's what you can get in Trevor Lawrence.
Well, Urban Meyer at Trevor Lawrence's pro day said we had extremely high expectations and we were not disappointed. All right, let's move on to the number 2 guy on this list. BYU's Zach Wilson, who by all means really helped himself this past season. Emory, I want to start with you here because there are a few out there who actually say Zach Wilson is more NFL ready than Trevor Lawrence. Where do you think he is in terms of being ready for the NFL?
I think he can play. I would have him third on this list, as opposed to second. But when you look at what he has done over his career, this was someone that has had BYU competitive, but he had a lot of injuries. That's why people wasn't on him last year or the year before, when he actually played well when he was out there, but he had a lot of injuries on both shoulders, and that brings into question his durability. But when you saw him this year, and you go and study him, you see a guy that has the moxie. He can throw on different platforms. He can throw on the move. He has the ability to be sort of a +1 in the run game. He can pick up those cheap yards on the ground. So yes, he can touch every level of the field with his passing ability, but you worry about the durability long term, and we hadn't seen that over the course of his career at BYU, other than what we saw this past season. So, yeah, he's talented, but right now you do have concerns about his injury history moving forward.
Emory hit on it. The durability is the big issue with Zach Wilson. And I've talked to teams that said exactly that. The arm strength is obviously there. He moves well in the pocket. He's a good athlete, but he's not a great athlete is what I've been told. And you see that sometimes on the field when he tries to buy time. And again, he takes those hits that you don't really want your quarterback taking, especially an undersized quarterback who's probably not going to be 6'2" when he's measured at his pro day. So that's the concern. And he doesn't have the longevity in terms of putting up huge numbers over the course of his career, because as Emory mentioned, while he did play well at times in 2019, he was hit with the injury bug. That was not an issue with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence missed time because he had COVID, and that was it. Every other time he was out there making plays on the edge. He can certainly run with the ball. He probably took too many hits if you're Urban Meyer and that Jacksonville coaching staff watching him play in college. But we know he can do that. We know he can take those hits. We know he can get back up from them. He's also 4 or 5 inches taller than Zach Wilson, and I think that's a concern. I don't think, look, there may be an NFL team that thinks Zach Wilson is more ready to play than Trevor Lawrence, but they're not going to say it out loud, and they're not going to tell a bunch of people about it. I think Trevor Lawrence is a clear-cut #1, and I don't think there's a lot of argument there.
You keep those thoughts to yourself. Emory, who's your #2 guy?
My #2 guy is Justin Fields, and if Fields played one more season, his resume would have looked a lot like Trevor Lawrence. You talk about playing meaningful games, significant games. This guy came in on short notice last year and put up record numbers, was a Heisman finalist twice in his career. So we've seen him do it at the highest level consistently. A lot of people talked about his ability to run, and that's what he can do best. However, we saw him get, smacked in that Clemson game, took that one dimension away from his game. He essentially beat Clemson with his arm. And that's something that people need to give him more credit for. They talk about the passing game and talk about, well, he didn't do well this year against Northwestern or Indiana. Well, that's the passing offense of Ohio State. It's all option routes. So he's having to wait for the receivers to read the same things that he is reading out there in the pocket. That's why it looks to the layperson that he's holding the football, but that's just the offense. And you see Fields has done a great job protecting the ball. He's played well on both ends of offense. So for me, he's more battle tested than a Zach Wilson, and has shown in the biggest that he can do a great job playing from behind, playing situational football. So I would take him right under Trevor Lawrence.
Emory said this before, and it's a good point. Trevor Lawrence played a full season more than Justin Fields, and Emory touched on that just a second ago. Don't forget, early on in the sophomore year of Trevor Lawrence, he was struggling to the point that we're like, uh-oh, this guy isn't a robot. He can't make every throw. He does make mistakes, and we saw glimpses of that last year in year 2 in that Ohio State offense for Justin Fields. The Northwestern game and the Indiana games, which you always hear about. But if you're building a quarterback in the lab, in today's NFL, it is literally Justin Fields. I love a lot about his game. We're at the time of the year in the pre-draft process where you're looking for reasons not to like players, and I think that's why you hear some of the negative things you hear about all these quarterbacks, Justin Fields included. The only thing with Justin Fields is I don't know if he's ready right away to play. And I would say the same thing last year had Trevor Lawrence came out, because he struggled for part of the year. I think the sophomore year, or at least the second year for Justin Fields at Ohio State, was more consistent than Trevor Lawrence's second sophomore season at Clemson, and that's noteworthy. That said, we're in an NFL where if you're a top 10, top 15 pick, even top 32 pick, there's a chance as a quarterback you're going to be asked to play early on in the season. And we saw it last year and the year before that. If Justin Fields is drafted pretty high, I imagine we'll see it again, although I think it might be in his best interest to sit on the bench for at least a month or 6 weeks.
All right, Ryan, a lot of people also think Trey Lance needs a little bit more experience. I mean, kudos to him. I was just looking at 24/7 Sports out of high school. He was a 3-star recruit outside 2000 nationally. And you mentioned his athleticism and just how incredible that is. So if he can keep that, if he can get a little bit more experience, how dangerous could he be in the NFL?
Trevor Lawrence is a wild card. He has 17 Trey Lance is a wild card. He has 17 career starts in college. He won them all. That's certainly noteworthy. Didn't have a lot of turnovers, as you mentioned. Didn't throw one at all during the 2019 season when he had 28 touchdowns. He did have one in this sort of showcase Central Arkansas game earlier in the fall, which you can't really take a whole lot from. He had his pro day today, and he looked pretty sharp. He missed a couple throws. I do not care about that. The arm strength is what popped. His ability to move in the pocket is what popped. We didn't get a chance to see him run, but we know he can do that. That's one of the things he does well. It's just a matter of him playing more football. And again, it depends on the system. We've said this a lot about the quarterbacks. Where you end up has a lot to do with how your career turns out. If Josh Allen goes to a truly terrible team like the Jets, he's probably not the Josh Allen that we know now, thanks in part to his athleticism and being in the right system with someone like Brian Daboll. And I think that's something you have to consider with Trey Lance as well. If he's there around 12, and I don't know if he will be, you have to imagine that Kyle Shanahan is going to be extremely happy with the opportunity to work with someone with so much upside. The last thing I'll say, and it's sort of funny, I mean, we talked about the new coach for the Jaguars being at that pro day for Trevor Lawrence. He was nowhere to be seen today around North Dakota State because he knows who he's taking. But there are a lot of other coaches there and a lot of other GMs, including Joe Douglas of the Jets, seeing what Trey Lance has to offer in person. It was pretty impressive.
Let's move on to the fifth guy on this list. Let's talk about Alabama's Mac Jones. Ryan, you and I have talked a lot about Mac Jones. You're a fan of his, as is Pete Prisco, actually. So, Emory, I want to go with you here. Where do you put Mac Jones on this list? And also what you think his biggest strength and weaknesses are heading into the draft?
You know, he'd be my fourth quarterback. I think we live in an era where people want to see the flashy play, but sometimes solid is exactly what you need. He's stable, and that's a good thing. He reminds me a lot of Matt Hasselbeck and how he plays the position. And what I love about his game is that the accuracy and the placement are consistent at all levels of the field. And when you have that consistency and you pair that up with catch and run guys at receiver, you're going to have a lot of big plays. And I think that's what we saw against with Alabama. I love how people say, well, he's not going to play with good talent as he moves on. He had all that talent around him. Like, he's going to the NFL. He's not going to, he's not going back down to college. He's going to the NFL where they're all pro players. They're all great players. So he should play fine. Now, he doesn't have the athletic skill set that we see nowadays a lot of quarterbacks have. So versus pressure, it could be a problem. And his arm strength and velocity isn't the strongest. So everything for him has to be timing based in order for him to have that success.
All right, we do expect most likely to see all 5 of these guys go in the first round. In some of Ryan's mock draft, 4 of them in the top 8. So expecting a run on quarterbacks here. But let's talk about a quarterback sleeper in the draft. Emory, I want to start with you because I was listening to you before we came on air. You said you were digging deep to find some good ones. So who did you come up with?
Listen, I went to our nation's military, the Air Force Academy. Donald Hammond III, Air Force runs a triple option, which is great. So you know about the athleticism. But firstly, you don't see quarterbacks that run the option at 6'2", 220. And then second, you don't see option quarterbacks throw the football like Donald Hammond III is able to throw the football. He is fantastic. He didn't play this year, didn't qualify for the team, so he's coming out into the NFL draft. He's an excellent target throwing the football, and I think he's someone that you can get later in the draft, maybe as an undrafted free agent that has tremendous upside. I'll also throw out Brady Davis from Illinois State. You talk about a guy that can throw a football legitimately through someone's face. That's Brady Davis. He has the tools that you want at the position. He's coming off of an injury. He was down at the College Gridiron Showcase, an all-star game, did really well, and there's a lot of teams interested in his Josh Allen-like skill set.
Yeah, Emory went deep there. I'm not going quite so deep. I'm going more day 2. But guys that we haven't talked a lot about because we're always focused on those top 5 guys there, Amanda. Kellen Mond out of Texas A&M, 4-year starter, got better each and every year. I watched him over the summer, and I said, okay, he makes some mistakes. He forces some balls. He looks like a day 3 guy. And then I watched him this year. The game that stuck out to me the most was the Florida game. He beat Florida. The Alabama game, their only loss. The Arkansas game I watched, and I was blown away at how consistent he was, how many times he made the right decision with the football. He can absolutely spin it. He's 6'2". He can run a little bit. So again, one of these prototypical quarterbacks that you want in today's NFL. Now, I was really excited. I was talking to a scout about this. He goes, there's some issues with the footwork. He can be robotic at times. Go back and watch LSU and Mississippi State and then revisit that. And he struggled in those games. But they still found a way to win, and he still made plays when he had to. And I like him as a day 2 pick, and I like him probably as well as Kyle Trask right now. And I think that's good news for teams that are looking for a quarterback in round 2 or round 3.
Ryan, quickly before we take a break, shout out to your 27th mock draft, the first 3-rounder of the year, so people can check that out on CBSSports.com. All right, Ryan and Emory, you guys hang on for just a second, because coming up, we are going to talk about running backs. We only saw one in the first round last year. So between Travis Etienne and Najee Harris, who are you going with first? We'll hear what our experts have to say next.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.